I hadn't seen my parents since they kicked me out at 17, until they walked into my grandfather's will reading, talking about renovation plans for their new apartment. They didn't know he left behind one final letter, and it had only my name on it. I, 29M, never thought the most satisfying moment of my life would happen inside a lawyer's office that smelled like old carpet and cheap coffee. But here we are. Let me back up. When I was 17, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table on a Tuesday evening, and by Wednesday morning, I was on the street with a duffel bag and $40 in cash. The reason? I had told them I wanted to study literature instead of engineering. That was it. No drugs, no crime, no dramatic blowout that had been building for years. Just a 17-year-old kid who liked books more than circuits. My father told me that if I was going to throw my future away, I could do it somewhere else. My mother sat beside him and said nothing, which was somehow worse. She didn't agree loudly. She just agreed quietly. I spent the first 2 weeks at a classmate's house, then a cousin's couch, then a rented room above a laundromat that cost me $400 a month and smelled like detergent and old wood. I worked at a cafe in the mornings, a bookstore in the evenings, finished my final year of school in between. I applied to colleges on a public library computer because I couldn't afford the internet. I got a partial scholarship. I took out loans for the rest. I ate instant noodles for so many months straight that even now, a decade later, the smell of them makes me slightly sick. There was one person who never turned their back on me during all of it. He was my father's father, which made his loyalty all the more complicated. He never openly criticized his son to me, never turned family dinners into courtrooms, but he showed up in the ways that mattered. He deposited money into my account every month, not a lot, just enough to keep me from drowning. He called every Sunday without fail. When I graduated college, he drove 4 hours to sit in the audience. When I got my first real job at a publishing house, he took me out for dinner and ordered wine like it was the most important occasion in the world. When I published my first book, 3 years ago, small press, small run but mine, he bought 12 copies and kept one on his nightstand. He never told my parents any of this. I found that out much later. My grandfather died 8 weeks ago. A stroke, quick, in his sleep. The kind of death people call peaceful, though I'm not sure that word does much for the people left behind. I found out through a cousin's text message, and I drove the 6 hours to his town alone, and I sat beside his grave and said things I'll keep to myself. The lawyer's office called me 2 days after the funeral. They told me to come in for the reading of the will. They mentioned carefully that other family members would be present. I knew what that meant. I arrived early enough to choose my seat, a chair near the window, back to the wall, facing the door. Some habits from the difficult years don't leave you. I watched my parents walk in at 11 minutes past the hour, and for a moment, standing there in the doorway, they didn't see me. My father looked older. His hair had gone fully silver, and he'd put on weight around the jaw. My mother was dressed sharply, a blazer over a silk blouse, the kind of outfit you wear when you want to look like someone who expects good news. They were speaking quietly to each other as they came in, and I caught the tail end of it. My mother was saying something about the kitchen layout, and my father was nodding. And they both had the specific energy of people who have already mentally moved into a space they don't yet own. Then my father looked up and saw me. There was a pause. The particular kind of pause that contains an entire history. He recovered quickly, gave a small nod, and sat down on the other side of the table. My mother looked at me longer. Something shifted in her expression, something I couldn't fully read. And then she sat beside him. Nobody spoke to me. I didn't speak to them. 2 aunts and an uncle filed in after. A few cousins. A small, precise man in his 60s, who set a folder on the table and thanked everyone for coming. He had the manner of someone who had done this many times and understood that the room was never just about legal documents. The will was read methodically. My grandfather had been a careful man. Specific items went to specific people. A watch to my uncle, a set of tools to a cousin, jewelry to the aunts. I watched my father's hand on the table, the fingers slightly curled, and I knew he was waiting. Then came the property. My grandfather owned an apartment in the city, modest, 2 bedrooms, but in a neighborhood that had become expensive in the last decade, worth considerably more than anyone probably expected. The lawyer paused before reading the relevant clause, and in that pause I heard my mother shift in her seat. The apartment was left to my father. I watched his shoulders drop half an inch with relief. My mother's lips pressed together in something that wanted to be a smile, but was being managed carefully for the room. She leaned toward him slightly. I could see them recalibrating, already, mentally calculating, already designing, already talking renovation over dinner that night. Then the lawyer said there was one more item. He said my grandfather had left a letter. That this letter had been kept separately from the estate documentation, that it was addressed to one person and had been left with instructions that it be read privately by that person at their discretion, but that the lawyer was required to acknowledge its existence to the room. He said my name. I need to describe what happened in that room, because I want to be honest about it. It wasn't cinematic. Nobody gasped. Nobody knocked over a glass. What happened was quieter, and because of that, somehow more complete. My father's head turned toward me slowly, like he was moving through water. My mother's composure didn't break, it just went very, very still. The aunts exchanged a look. The cousins stared at the table. The lawyer slid an envelope across to me. I picked it up. My name was written on the front, in my grandfather's handwriting, and just seeing that, those letters, that familiar slant, hit me somewhere I hadn't expected. The lawyer said everyone was free to go, and that any questions about the estate could be directed to his assistant. People began to stand. I stayed seated. My parents didn't leave immediately. My father stood by his chair for a moment, and I felt him looking at me, and I looked back. And there was something in his face that I hadn't seen before, or maybe had never been allowed to see, when I was 17. Something that looked like it wanted to be a question, and didn't know how to form itself. He left without saying anything. My mother, at the door, paused. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said she hoped I was doing well. Her voice was careful. The way you're careful with something you don't know how to hold. I told her I was doing well. I said it plainly, without warmth or coldness. Just the fact of it. She nodded, and left. I sat in the parking lot of the lawyer's office for 20 minutes, before I opened the letter, surrounded by the furniture and the air conditioning, and the residue of that room. The letter was 4 pages, handwritten, dated about 6 months before he died. The handwriting was slightly shakier than I remembered, which told me he'd known something was coming. He told me that he had watched what happened to me at 17, and had said nothing directly, because he believed, wrongly, he wrote, that he was clear about the wrongness. That staying close to his son was the only way he could stay close to me. He said he had spent years trying to be a bridge, and that he had stayed too long in that role, and that silence can be a kind of failure, even when it's trying to be neutral. He said he was leaving me something that wasn't in the will. He told me to look in the 3rd drawer of the desk in his study, the one in the apartment that had just been given to my father, and that I should go there before anything was moved. He told me to look for a second envelope, a heavier one. He wrote that he had put aside money separately from the estate, not through a trust, not on paper, because he hadn't wanted it to become a legal argument. Cash, bonds, and a separate account in both our names that had never appeared in his financial disclosures, because he had been careful and he had had a good accountant, and he had started doing this when I was 19, and had been doing it for 10 years. He told me how much was in it. I read the number twice. Then, I sat in the parking lot and cried in a way I hadn't cried since I was 17, sitting on a curb outside a house that had just stopped being mine. I've gotten some messages asking what happened next, so I'll fill in the gaps. I called my father the following morning. I want to be truthful about this. I was nervous making that call, which I hadn't expected. I had spent years not being nervous about him, had worked very hard at that, and then the nerves showed up anyway. I told him I needed to go to the apartment to collect some personal items that grandfather had wanted me to have. I didn't explain further. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said that would be fine, and that he would leave a key with the building manager. He didn't ask me what I was collecting. I went that afternoon. The building manager let me in. The apartment smelled like my grandfather, wood polish, and old books, and a faint memory of pipe tobacco from 20 years ago when he used to smoke. I stood in the entryway for a while before I could make myself move. The desk was exactly where it had always been, in the study, beside the window that looked out at the street. 3rd drawer. The envelope was there, thicker than I expected, held shut with a rubber band that had dried and cracked slightly with age. Inside was a key, a handwritten account number and instructions, and a folded document with both our names on it. I took everything. I closed the drawer. I walked through the apartment once more before I left. On the way out, I straightened the framed photograph on the hallway wall, a picture of my grandfather and me, at my college graduation. Him in his good jacket, me in my robe, both of us, squinting into the sun. He'd hung it himself. It had always been slightly crooked. I fixed it. Then I left. Update 2. The account was real. The amount was real. I spent 4 days working with a banker and a lawyer of my own, to transfer everything properly into my name. And they told me it was all clean and clear and mine. I want to be honest that I felt something complicated, sitting across from those professionals, watching them process the paperwork. Not triumphant exactly. Something quieter. Something that felt like being handed a bill of health after a long illness. Relief, mixed with the memory of being sick. My father called me 2 days later. He said he'd heard from the building manager that I had collected some things. He asked if everything was all right. His voice had a quality I didn't know how to name. Not angry, not demanding, something more careful than that. I told him everything was fine. I told him grandfather had left me some personal things and that I had collected them. I kept my voice level and friendly, the way you're friendly to someone at a function you'll never attend again. He said he said it twice actually. I see. Then he asked if we can have lunch sometime. I thought about 17. I thought about a Tuesday evening and a Wednesday morning. I thought about $40 and a duffel bag, and instant noodles and a library computer, and a letter written by a man who had spent 10 years quietly making sure I didn't fall. I told him I'd have to see about my schedule. I told him I'd be in touch. I haven't called back yet. I'm not sure I will. Not out of cruelty. I've spent a lot of years making sure I'm not doing things out of cruelty. But because some doors once closed from the outside, stop being the same doors when you try to open them from inside. They're new doors now, and I get to decide if I want to walk through them. What I know is this: I have a good life. I have work I love, a home I made myself, a bank account that would make my 17-year-old self sit down from the shock of it. I have the memory of a man who kept showing up, quietly, week after week, Sunday after Sunday, for 12 years. He left me something that can't be measured in the third drawer of a desk. He left me the proof that somebody had been watching, the whole time, and had decided I was worth believing in. That's the thing about quiet people who love you right. You don't always know the full shape of what they've done, until they're gone. I keep the letter in the same drawer where I keep my copy of my first book. He's on the acknowledgements page. He always knew why.